Welcome. Thank you. I'm the person known as the lockpicking lawyer. At least that's what I told these guys. I actually just have vaguely similar looking hands and the same voice. But seriously, that would be pretty epic if in fact I was not him. As I was sitting in the back listening to Pope, it occurred to me it's pretty unusual for a group of people to come see someone speak without having any idea who that person is. So thank you for the vote of confidence. I will try to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions. So if there is not time, I'll be around the con a little bit. Feel free to come up to me, ask whatever you want. Let's start with the awkward stuff. Yes, I know I'm a little bit boring. I've spoken at a lot of conferences before, but they were all legal conferences, and I was speaking on legal topics. And the great thing about legal conferences is it is perfectly expected for half the audience to fall asleep and the other half to track you down to tell you you're wrong during happy hour. Which happy hour, by the way, lasts somewhere between 9 in the morning and 9 the next morning. I'm going to try to do a little better today, but know this going into it. I come from a background where it's perfectly normal and acceptable to be really boring. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I actually went back to one of my old presentations. This is an actual slide I inflicted on people at a conference. And this was a conference in Vegas. It was supposed to be one of the fun conferences. Yeah, that's what you get. So I don't want to be too arrogant and assume everyone here knows who I am. So quickly, Lockpicking Lawyer is the name I use online for my YouTube channel, where I test a variety of security products. I started the channel about 7 or 8 years ago. I've posted over 1,300 videos now, and we've got about 3.5 million subscribers and about 780 million views. And the stat that really kind of blows my mind is we have 4,300 years of view time. And that's what it was 4,300 years ago. So a little bit about who I am, and seriously, these are the 3 most common questions I get. The answers are yes, no, and no. Yes, I am really a lawyer. My channel name is literal. I am, or at least I was, a lawyer who also picks locks. I practiced law for about 15 years, litigating mainly in corporate governance and related legal fields, nothing related to security. No, I am not, nor have I ever been, a practicing locksmith, and for what it's worth, that guy is not either. Or if he is, I hope he charges by the hour like a lawyer, because he's never getting into that door. And finally, no, teaching people how to pick locks is not a clever or devious form of client development. I think it's kind of hilarious that people think that. I have never practiced any form of criminal law, nor do I ever plan to. So, first, thank you for respecting the no camera rule. I thought I'd briefly tell you why I asked for that. And to be blunt, I don't want anyone to know who I am. First, I don't think my name adds or subtracts from my message. I have no desire to be famous or well-known. The secrecy actually started when I first started making videos. I had a lot of big, well-known companies as clients, and I didn't want my online presence to interfere with that. And then I discovered the internet is a really, really weird place. Let me tell you, I thought I was a weird guy, but crazy started coming out of the woodwork. And I'm not talking about normal strange, like the come help me break into Area 51, or come fly out to the Middle East. I want you to train this chic security detail. That's weird, but kinda expected. I'm talking about full-fledged tinfoil hat, fake moon landing, Elvis is alive, flat and/or hollow earth wackadoodles. I don't particularly want to meet any of them. Speaking of other people I don't particularly want to meet, I also discovered that lock-picking groupies is a thing. Who would have thought it possible? And while lingerie in my P.O. box was not predictable, the response of Mrs. Lockpicking Lawyer was predictable. Yeah, she wasn't that happy about it. On a slightly more serious note, I have had several threats made against me, some more credible than others. I've had PIs hired to find me. Thankfully, security community is pretty small. I know some of them, others let me know. And they've had all kinds of strange things told about me. Everything from, I'm a deadbeat dad, faking disability, we gotta track this guy down for the insurance company, to I ran away with their child. It's some weird stuff. I've also had tracking devices sent to my P.O. box, hidden in packages, the hopes that I would take them home to my family. I have no idea why people do these things, but I am relatively certain I don't want to find out. So please respect my desire for anonymity. I have a family about whom I care deeply, and I'd like to keep the weirdness of the internet away from them. So, what am I talking about today? This is obviously a security conference, but I'd wager that the vast majority of people here are pretty much solely in computer security. Yeah? Well, I am the least computer literate person in the room. I'm not a complete idiot, but every single person here knows more than me. So what do I have to offer? Well, if stereotypes are any indication, we actually have quite a bit in common. I like drinking scotch. I drink way too much Red Bull. I do my best work after midnight. And even when I try to explain it, most people have absolutely no clue what I do. And I'm pretty sure that includes my wife. Though, to be fair, my wife is awesome at pretending she cares whenever I seem excited about something. But to be serious, computer, physical, frankly, all kinds of security have a lot of similarities, and I think there are some common lessons. Now, if you've watched my YouTube channel at all, you've probably seen me open a wide variety of security devices, and after watching me do this a few hundred times, you may have asked yourself a question that I'm asking every day, and that is, how did things ever get so bad? And why is it that we can go to a store like this, and every single lock on the shelf has some design vulnerability? How is it possible? I mean, in other security fields, people tend to be less tolerant of this sort of nonsense, with exceptions, I know. A lot of you are gonna laugh because you know about what a dumpster fire a lot of computer security can be, but I'm actually impressed with how quickly the security in the digital world is evolving. And despite the fact that there's still a ton of progress that needs to be made, we've actually reached an impressive level of maturity in the last 20 years. And more importantly, that security often filters down to end users. On the other hand, the lock that's on most people's front door has stayed essentially the same for roughly 160 years. It was this guy in 1861, handsome fellow named Linus Yale Jr., who refined his father's lock design into what we use today. To put that in perspective, 1861, that's when the first shots of the American Civil War were fired. Put it differently, we went from the Wright brothers' first flight at Kitty Hawk to landing at the moon in 66 years, about half that time. Yet for some reason, we're still stuck with this. Even a lot of the high security locks, they still got that same core in it, the same vulnerabilities we took and grafted on top of high security, higher digital security. So why is it that this one industry is so resistant to change and innovation when everything else in our lives has evolved so quickly? And just as importantly, what does that mean for our physical security? These are questions that I've actually given a lot of thought to, because if you don't know what the problem is, you really can't solve it. And I think it comes down to two factors. They're historically and culturally based. The first is the absurd, historic secrecy surrounding physical security issues. And the second is a mindset among security engineers that allows for poor products to thrive. So let's talk about secrecy first. Locksmithing, all the way back to its very earliest forms, up to the present day really, have held very, very close the tricks they use to defeat locks. In fact, I've read in the early days, those breaking this wall of silence would certainly be ostracized, but probably would also face bodily injury, if not death. So, I've had some very long conversations with, obviously, present-day locksmiths who still insist, to this day, quite vigorously, that me revealing how terrible locks are is putting your dear little granny in danger. And locksmiths tend to get pretty angry about it too, angry with me. They apparently either don't think there's a problem, or they know there's a problem and think that hiding it will make it go away. There's a name for this. Anyone know what it is? Security by obscurity, heard that a couple places? Absolutely. And is this considered good or bad? That's right. Awesome. Anyone professing this same line of thought in the world of digital security would be absolutely crucified, well, metaphorically crucified, and would probably not be able to find a job. And that's as it should be. Employers don't like hiring idiots. Yet, well, some do. I'm sure you've all got one at work. Yet, in the world of locksmithing, not only does this line of thinking reign supreme, but those who abide by it think themselves morally and ethically superior to others. It's pretty incredible. It's like every single one of them collectively decided to simultaneously put their head in the sand. It's pretty remarkable. To be fair, I am strawmanning a bit. What they usually say is that the problem should be solved in private, behind closed doors where the public can't see it. At best, I think that's one of these. Anyone know what this is? And please don't say weed. Fig leaf. That's right. The position has some facial appeal until you realize that the same problems have existed for decades and decades before any of us in this room were born, with little or no forward progress. Interestingly, if you go to Wikipedia, it says that an early opponent of security by obscurity was actually a locksmith. We good? There we go. 150 years before I ever picked a lock, this dapper fellow by the name of Alfred Charles Hobbs was publicly demonstrating to people how to pick the high security locks of his day. And he caught way more heat than I ever did. And in response to his critics' concerns about exposing security flaws that would make them more vulnerable to criminals, He stated the obvious, something that remains true even today. He said, rogues are very keen in their profession and already know much more than we can teach them. Essentially, he was saying that criminals already know how to be criminals. After all, they're criminals. Now let's try not to be stupid and fix our problems. That didn't get a lot of traction back then. So, what is the result of this lunatic mindset? What happens when security by obscurity is your guiding principle? What does it mean for the locks that you purchase every single day? It means this. This is the result. And I know a lot of people in the Locksport community, they like to pick on Master Lock, but like most things that have evolved into a cliche, there's a pretty good basis in reality. Let's take this as an example. Master Lock makes a couple different versions of this, branded Magnum, Pro Series, American Lock, which is owned by Master Lock, but whatever they call it, it's king of the hill. This is the 10 out of 10 security rating. Doesn't get any better than this. If you go into your local hardware store, this is likely the highest security lock you can buy. They're used by tradesmen to secure their vans with tens of thousands of dollars of tools in them. In fact, it secures their livelihood. You see them on warehouses, gates, garages. They're everywhere. It's inconceivable that a lock like this, the best offered, could have a flaw that allows it to be opened in 2 seconds, right? Inconceivable. To be fair, it's something that a security engineer wouldn't know about unless they were paying attention since, how many years is it? Oh yeah, 1934. And Pope was complaining that you're working on the same issues after 10 years. Security professionals have known lock combing as an issue for about 85 years. For those of you who don't know, lock combing is a really simple exploit where you put something that looks a little bit like a comb into the lock, and you lift all of the pins, the key pins, which you see in red, and the blue pins, which are the driver pins, all the way above the shear line. That's the line between the cylinder and the lock housing. And that allows the lock to rotate freely. About a year ago, I bought 10 of these Master Lock products at some expense, and much like the 10 out of 10 security rating, 10 out of 10 were vulnerable to combing. That's on my YouTube channel, but I actually brought a couple of them with us so we can look at them right now. Okay, here we go. Let's start with the Master Magnum. This is probably the one you're going to pick up if you go to Home Depot. We use this little comb-looking device. Okay, maybe I lied. 2 seconds was a little too long. This is the Master Pro Series. This is what you get if you want the upgraded version. Once again, we stick that little comb device in there. And if you want the premium version, made by American Lock, the Series 2010, once again, we take our little comb pick, and we got it open. And just in case you think that is limited to only this particular lock, no, Master Lock gave us a lot more. If you've ever been in a locker room, you've likely seen a couple of these on the lockers. Here we have a 4-pin comb, And all of these will open pretty much as fast as if you had the key. Of course, it's not just master lock. We have a little Brinks here. And just to round it out, let's go with this ABUS, which, by the way, has a great little warning on the bottom. Unauthorized removal of this lock constitutes breaking and entering. Yeah, that's gonna stop someone. Okay. So, why do lock makers do this if it's been a known issue since before all of you were born? I think the answer is because they can. The point of the business is to sell locks, and if you, the consumer, don't know about the issue, you can't avoid bad locks, and you end up using flawed products to protect your most valuable belongings. But remember, according to locksmiths, you're not allowed to know about this for your own protection. This is the direct result of secrecy in the security world. People relying on the obscurity of an exploit to defend against it. Let's talk about tubular locks, because this is another one where secrecy in the security community has resulted in a horrible inversion of security perceptions. I know there's a lot of people here who watch my videos, so this may come as a surprise to you, but if you show this lock to most people, they think it's the upgrade. This is the high security option. This is what you want when you're really serious about keeping people out of your locks. And that's reflected in the applications they're used in. For instance, they are extremely popular for gun locks and storage boxes. It's the thing that's designed to, among other things, protect lives if you're a gun owner and live with children. They also remain mildly popular in the low-dollar vending applications, though most people have the good sense to switch. But why is this a problem? Well, as many of you probably know, tubular lock impressioning has been a thing for 60 years. It allows the majority of these locks to be opened with a cheap tool in just a couple seconds. And I brought a couple of them so we can do that. I got the, there we go. I got this, which is the cheapest tubular lock impressioning tool I own. And this is the ignition switch for a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. See how fast it takes to open this up. You can see this is set to 0. I only show you that because it's probably going to open so fast you're going to question me. Or it will not work at all because that's the way live demos work. Let's reset it. There we go. How about this lock? This might be one of the most famous tubular locks in the world right now. Anyone know what that is? That's right. Whose? If you don't know what I'm talking about, just go on YouTube and search for my wife's beaver. Trust me, it's worth it. This is actually a lock that is used to hold a gumball machine closed, made by the Beaver Gumball Machine Company up in Canada, where beaver is the national animal. God bless live demos. Turns out getting into my wife's beaver is a little harder today. apparently she's a little shy in a room full of people. We'll give it one last try and then move on. Normally I would have moved on to single pin picking it by now, but unfortunately the gods of live demos decided to smite me today. But there'll be at least one more, so I can redeem myself, I hope. I don't want to be too repetitive, so I could do quite a few more of these, but one more, because this is a problem with locks that you can buy in a hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, today. Bypass drivers. They've been around for roughly 40 years. They can be used to reach through the keyhole of a lock, if that keyhole is unshielded in the back, and simply turn the locking mechanism. There's absolutely, I don't know how many locks I found, but it's dozens of locks that are susceptible to this. I brought a couple, and I selected these only because they're available right now in Home Depot. And at first blush, they actually look pretty nice. We have thick boron alloy shackles, laminated steel construction, which, despite the Master Lock reputation, is not necessarily bad. However, if you take a tool like this and just reach right through the keyhole, damn you live demos. There we go. There we go. That one went a little easier. Of course, the big one's the easy one. But once again, if you ask many locksmiths, you're not allowed to know about this for your own protection. Just wondering, anyone here feeling safer? Now, what some of you might be thinking right now is maybe he's taking this a little bit too far. And I'm sorry, I think they're in different order, but we'll keep going with it. I'm suggesting that a lot of these blatant security flaws are actually, they exist on purpose. Hanlon's razor says you shouldn't ascribe to malice that which can be adequately explained by incompetence. And that's what I thought at first. And I think there is an element of incompetence to this, and I'll get to that in just a few minutes. But I had an experience really early on in my YouTube journey that made me question that, and it's happened several times since then. We're going to go back to video number 23. It was a terrible video in every measurable sense, except for the picking. I did get it open. But the only reason I remember it was the first of many times that I received a complaint from a lock maker. This is a locking keychain. There's nothing special about it. They're often used by vending machine people. They'll put every key for every machine on their route on a single keychain. I've seen them used in prisons before. Any place where it's really important that you don't lose a key. It had a tubular core in it that was easily impressioned, much like the ones we looked at a minute ago. And the company reached out to me and they asked me not only to take the video down, but to take every single video I had on lockpicking down. They apparently complained to YouTube about this as well. And they said I was doing nothing but showing criminals how to steal from hardworking people. Oddly enough, I'm getting the exact same complaints that Alfred Hobbs was getting 160 years ago. Now, I thought their email was particularly strange, considering their own website clearly states these locks can be opened with an impressioning tool. So apparently I was the dirty, rotten scoundrel for showing people the same thing they published on their website. I'm not sure the company ever realized exactly how backwards their response was. We actually both agreed the core was insecure, and if a lock is insecure, it's not something that we should obscure. People should know about it. The only thing that can come from hiding something like that is people inappropriately relying on an insecure product, something that's ill-suited for the task. So when viewed in that light, I'm not, quote, showing criminals a better way to steal from hardworking people. I'm helping the hardworking people better protect what they own from the criminals by telling them where the flaws are. But more fundamentally, they made the lock, they knew it was insecure, and they chose to do nothing about it. Yet in the twisted, messed up world of many lock makers, I'm the bad guy. So no, I don't think it's only incompetence. I do have to admit though, when I got that email back on video number 23, it was the first time I had ever truly thought about what I was doing. And as I continued to make videos, it was experiences like that that convinced me that my channel could be used to make a difference. I'd been complaining about how bad the locks were, but it started to occur to me that I could also be part of the solution. Of course, nothing's going to change as long as people keep buying the same terrible locks, and they'll keep buying the same terrible locks if they don't know any better. So, mass consumer education is very, very important. We need to break that wall of secrecy, and that's where I thought I could make a difference. The thing is, I realized I couldn't get people to care about the issue unless they watched my videos, and I couldn't get them to watch my videos unless they cared about the issue. Catch-22. So, how do you get people to care about locks? If you think about it, it really shouldn't be that hard. I mean, everyone owns locks. We depend on them every day to protect our most valuable belongings, maybe even our lives. So why is it that people are watching videos about cars, guns, knitting, gardening, cooking, but they don't watch videos about the products they rely on every day? It's something they really should be interested in. And I think I figured some of that out. Obviously, I've gotten some people to watch, and I want to share with you what I did. The first was lower the price of admission. And I'm not talking about money. All my videos are obviously free on YouTube. I'm talking about something a little more valuable, time. I was making videos that would last 5, 10, 15 minutes. And that's a tall ask. Even if YouTube suggests one of my videos to people, and even if they look at the thumbnail and think that's kind of interesting, asking for 15 minutes of someone's life is a tall ask for a stranger. But if that video is 1.5 to 3 minutes long, well, that's a little bit more palatable. What it also means is I have to plan my videos and be exceedingly careful, 1, to make my points very quickly, and 2, never waste a viewer's time. I don't like it when people waste my time. I figure my viewers are the same way. Second, after viewing my catalog of videos, I realized I wasn't showing locks that people care about. I was showing tons of really cool locks from around the world, exotic stuff that lock nerds like me find really interesting. It's great for my lock sport resume. Not so good for people who have never heard of them, and they certainly aren't going to watch a 10-minute video of a lock they never heard of. So what I realized was, if I was going to reach people, I needed to start by showing locks that were relevant to them. As an example, bike locks are relevant. For better or worse, if a person is going to spend more than $50 on a lock, it's probably on a bike lock, and they tend to do their research. So why not make videos that people are already looking for? It's one of the reasons you'll find so many bike locks on my channel. And to make matters better, It taps into a pre-existing community of riders who are going to share that among themselves. Same thing with gun locks. People care deeply about gun safety. Many do research before buying a gun lock. And again, taps into a robust pre-existing community. And this issue is really close for me. I have a young son, and given what's at stake, a lot of the gun locks on the market are absolutely appalling. Same thing can be said with motorcycle locks. Bikers love their bikes, and theft is a major concern. Why not show them something they're interested in? And the same thing can be said for literally anything you can buy at Home Depot. The locks tend to be pretty bad, but these are the locks that people are by far the most likely to buy and use. And people tend to notice when you say, I can open your front door in 30 seconds. Another was to choose locks with a background to them, locks that can tell a story. I started doing my research and trying to find just one or two sentences that I could say about a lock to put a little bit of a human aspect on them. And it's one of the cool things about locks is they really do tell us a lot about the people who made them and the societies they're a product of. Now, most locks out there right now just tell the story of bean counters who want you to make it as cheaply as possible. But there are some really interesting things you can say about locks. And I have a couple of examples here. I posted a video of this car boot after I saw a bizarre news report showing a scammer in Chicago who was going to random parking lots, booting people's cars, and then making them pay to get it removed. So I found the exact same model and showed people how to open it up. It's an interesting story, it's something they care about, and they also got to see how bad the lock was. These are IRS whiskey locks from about 100 years ago, the Prohibition era. These locks tell another interesting story, a story about a country that was terribly divided over a widely unpopular policy where theft and corruption were a serious concern, so serious, in fact, that the IRS commissioned and used what was probably the best padlock in the world at the time. These things were way ahead of their time in the 1920s. This is a gas cap lock. What's that have to do with the fall of the Soviet Union? Well, this lock was made literally weeks before the collapse of the Union. And it was a lock that was necessitated by a crippling oil shortage that scholars credit with hastening the end of the Union. Soviet dual custody locks, the physical embodiment of what we call the two-man rule. Dual custody locks are actually pretty rare in the US, but in the USSR, it was a totally different story. They were far more common than most people understood, and they were used to keep products from disappearing onto the black market. It was a thriving black market where there was constant shortages of normal consumer goods, something that you all can probably appreciate after the great TP shortage of 2020. But the locks tell the story of a country that had so much corruption that they had to implement measures like this. This one's hilarious. It's a gear lock, G-E-R-E, not G-E-A-R. It's actually a really interesting lock mechanically. It's dual custody, but only one keyhole. You stick one key in, turn, take it out, stick the second key in, turn, it opens. But no one cares about that. What they care about is the two Indonesian guys who loved Richard Gere so much that they named a lock company after him without him even knowing about it. See, you guys are going to remember that lock now. Kryptonite 2 and 3, products that absolutely revolutionized bike security. But the progression between these two locks, the one on the left and the one on the right, tells the story of how the inventor of the bicycle U-lock was cut out of the company that he was part of founding and was not a part of it by the time his invention became a household name and household item. Godrej. Locke tells the story of a great patriot in India who started a lock company as a form of rebellion against the British Empire. You see, there was a huge grassroots movement to only buy domestically made things in India. Nothing from Western countries, nothing from Europe. Problem was, no one made good locks in India, so they were all still buying Chubbs. So Mr. Godrej quit his law practice, started a lock company, and that's the product. Interestingly enough, it's actually now the largest conglomerate in all of India. The miracle locks. This is what happened when the US military finally figured out that it was probably a really bad idea to defend nuclear weapons with master locks. It also tells the story of the horrible mismanagement of this company that was thrown together to respond to that request from the military. I could tell stories like this for hours, and you can probably tell I get pretty excited about it, but as I was saying, I'm not supposed to waste your time. Now, if any of you were listening carefully, you know I left a couple loose ends out there. First, I said in the beginning there were two factors I want to talk about: secrecy and a poor mindset in security engineering. We haven't touched on number two yet. And I also said in discussing Hanlon's razor that I think there is an element of incompetence involved. And I see those as the same issue that we're going to talk about now. There's a concept I came across a couple of years ago, first in a news article, then in academic research, that really struck a chord with me. Apparently, there is a mature body of research suggesting that human thought processes rely heavily on preconceived notions. As I think it must. I mean, we can't start from the ground up every time we make a decision. It's a concept that has all kinds of controversial implications, but it could explain quite a bit of the problem that we're having in security engineering. I think that when our brains analyze a system, we look at something like a lock, but it doesn't have to be a lock. We tend to put a lot of weight on what something is designed to do and ignore what it actually can do. And that's really important because the delta between those two concepts is it's the attacker's playground. It was a concept that was articulated really well in the movie Apollo 13. Does anyone know what happened? What Gene Kranz said when he was talking to his team of engineers about how to bring the astronauts back? Oh, he did say that. He said, "I don't care what anything was designed to do. I care what it can do." Now, that's often easier said than done because our thought process is usually poisoned very early on with something's intention. But if we can get past that, I think it makes us far better at building security products. It's what I like to call the hacker mindset. I know Pope was talking about getting the right mindset before. It's a term I use. I'm aware that others use it to explain a very complex concept, but I think it's really simple. Training ourselves to see a component's potential, not necessarily the physical component of a lock. It could be a line of code. It could be anything, really. But we need to see its potential rather than just its intended use. And it turns out lawyers do this all the time. Well, good lawyers do this all the time. No one's going to pay a lawyer $800 an hour to tell you what everyone already thinks the law is. You pay them a lot of money to be creative and figure out what the law can do. It actually reminds me of one of my favorite stories from practicing law. I was articulating my client's position on the phone with opposing counsel, who was a well-grade member of the bar, and I referenced part of the Delaware Limited Liability Company Code. I'll stop boring you with that. The lawyer stopped me and said, "Whoa, wait a second. I was on the legislative advisory committee that drafted that section, and that's not what it's for." And to be fair, he was definitely correct. That's not what it was for. I was kind of way out in left field, but despite the intentions of the drafters, if you put aside your preconceived notions of what that was for and just read the plain language of the statute, it supported my position. So I was able to respond as innocently as can be, as if I didn't know I was being crazy. Well, sir, I can't speak to what you intended, but that's certainly not what you wrote. That case settled pretty quickly, and the law was changed 2 years later. Same thing applies to locks. You look at this Brinks lock right here. It's a combination lock that I picked up at Home Depot, and anyone with eyes knows what that hole was intended to do. Holds the cover closed that covers up those little dials. But apparently, since everyone on the design team knew what that hole was designed for, they never asked what you could use it for. I just realized that sounded wrong. Make sure you practice in front of an audience. And what you can do is not that, you with dirty minds out there, is you can stick a hooked piece of wire in there and use it to manipulate the mechanism and find out the combination. But they either never asked themselves what could be done with that hole in the mechanism, or the alternative is they just didn't care. Same can be said about this master lock, and this is actually the epitome of irony. The red arrow points to false gates on the code wheels. False gates are a common design feature to make manipulation harder. But they made those false gates just a touch smaller, not quite as wide as the true gates, an oversight which I was able to exploit to decode any one of these locks in about a minute or less. And that's because everyone looked at this on the design team and they said, wow, that's great, we got false gates. Everyone knows what false gates are for, but never asked what you could do with them. We all know what they're intended for. Here's one that's absurdly common on standalone access control systems. And it doesn't matter if they're fingerprint locks like this one, or keypads, RFID, facial recognition. They all have some form of that blue component you see in the lower right-hand corner. What that is an electromagnetic relay used to switch the mechanism of whatever's holding the door closed, whether that be a magnet, a solenoid deadbolt, an electronic strike. Once again, everyone knew what that component was designed to do, but never asked what you could do with it. And what you can do is flip that relay and open the door by holding a magnet next to the fingerprint reader. Another one that is, I think, just as frightening, it's a locking gun rack designed for police cruisers. So that gun is locked in the rack behind glass in view of the general public. The designers thought it would be nice to have a little hidden switch in the passenger compartment they could push to release the lock. And they did that by putting a small electromagnetic solenoid in it. Everyone knew what that solenoid was for, was to release the cover. But what they didn't ask is what else you could do with it. And once again, just put a magnet right next to the lock, it opens right up. Once again, I could tell stories like this for a while. Suffice it to say, there's a reason why I have 1,300 videos, and it's not because these issues are rare. Unlike consumer education, this is not an easy problem to solve. Changing the way people think is hard in the best of times, and it's even harder for me since I seem to have developed a adversarial relationship with lock makers. Not quite sure how that happened. But I did try. I agreed to walk into the belly of the beast. I was going to go give a talk to the engineers at Allegiant. It's a company that owns Schlage. They own Kryptonite and about a half dozen other lock companies, where I was going to talk about this issue. And I had spent a lot of time thinking of exercises they could do to kind of break their mind from this constant looking at something as something they know rather than something that can be discovered. We were all set, and I was doing this all on my own dime. I wasn't charging them to come speak. I was flying out, my own travel expenses. 2 days before I was supposed to get on the plane, they called me, canceled, citing, quote, scheduling issues. And it was a pretty clear, don't call us, we'll call you sort of situation. I remember dating in college, so that paradigm is very familiar to me. So what can I do? Well, I can just keep embarrassing them until they run out of mistakes to make. But if we're going to learn from history, we know that once they run out of mistakes, they start at the beginning and start making the same old mistakes again. So what's the way forward? I don't know. How do you fix a mistake when they know about it and just keep making the same mistakes over and over again? It's frustrating. But I'll say this, and this is my last story. Reminds me of something that happened while I was practicing law. I went to a hearing, and I was mainly a defense attorney. Well, not mainly, I was only a defense attorney. And plaintiff's counsel stood up to argue his motion, and he just got savaged by the judge. I didn't have a chance to say a word. I stood up after the plaintiff made his argument, and I said, I think Your Honor has a pretty firm handle on the situation. Unless you have any questions, I'm just going to sit right back down. To which the judge said, finally, a lawyer who knows when to shut up. So afterwards, I went back to my office, and I was commiserating with other defense lawyers about the idiotic arguments they had seen made by plaintiff's lawyers. And we were within earshot of the corner office, and this old curmudgeonly lawyer who was literally drinking a beer at, I don't know, it was like a Wednesday afternoon or something, comes out of his office and says in his very gruff voice, "Why are you complaining? They're the reason you boys have a job." Well, I guess that's true. So in light of all that, thank you, Master Lock. I absolutely love what I'm doing right now, and it's companies like you that make it possible. That said, if you should ever decide to step up your game, I am just as happy to make videos praising you.